I see you, baby. Oh, yeah. Elle me hante, à chaque fois que je ferme les yeux, c'est à elle que je pense. Je n'ai jamais vu une fille aussi jolie. À chaque fois que je croise une autre, c'est à elle que je pense. Hey, belele, hey, yeah. Hey, belele, hey, yeah.
It's always a wonderful time here on Youth Forum, a platform where we celebrate success, a platform where we talk issues as it relates to young adults, and even without leaving the older ones behind. This time on Youth Forum, we'll be talking about something that is trending, and we're here with an organization. They call themselves So Far Don't Do. They're actually here on an advocacy course. But before I tell you what it is they're here for, let's get to meet them. I'll start from my immediate left. He is Ken Henshaw, and Ken Henshaw is the Executive Director, We the People. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
All right, next to him is Ona Chidi. And Ona Chidi is the River State Coordinator, So Far Don't Do. You're welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
We're also here with Dr. Austin Sado. Dr. Austin Sado is the ASU Chairman, University of Port Harcourt. Doctor, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be here.
What we're going to be discussing this morning is going to be something that you cannot afford to trade off. Yes. Talking about don't trade sex for grades, don't trade sex for marks. Yes. All right, let's start with the executive or the River State Coordinator, So Far Don't Do, Ona Chidi. So, let's meet you.
Yeah, like you said, my name is Ona Chidi. I'm the state coordinator of So Far Don't Do. We have done a whole lot of activity. But our worry is that students are so afraid to talk about these issues. Part of the things we'll be discussing about, because they need to know that So Far Don't Do is for them, and we are standing in for them. To add a voice to this voiceless, we are actually calling on them to give us their cases, for us to take it to the right channel. So Far Don't Do is a registered organization affiliated to ICPC. We are doing well in a whole lot of cases.
Should I say you're in partnership with So Far Don't Do, or
Yes,
you're
we are.
supporting the advocacy of So Far Don't Do, which is don't trade sex for grades, don't trade sex for marks. So, what about it? About this
Well,
cause?
thank you for having me here. But let me say that the slogan, don't trade sex for grades, is on the one hand speaking to students who trade sex for grades. Let me also say that there's another slogan, which is don't demand sex for grades. Okay? So both slogans, one puts emphasis on students, while the other puts emphasis on lecturers, because we understand that this is two sides of a similar coin. Lecturers demand sex, not just lecturers. Lecturers and staff of management in higher institutions demand sex for grades. Students sometimes prefer to trade sex for grades. But that's a different ballgame altogether. And so what is So Far Don't Do campaign? Like he said, So Far Don't Do is a campaign that seeks to empower students to the extent that they feel free and confident to walk up and report cases of sexual harassment. One year ago, if you spoke about sexual harassment, it was a matter that was barely inaudible. I mean, it was definitely inaudible. Nobody heard about it. It was neither here nor there. Until a young lady called Monica Sagie recorded an audio of a lecturer who was the professor was very confident demanding sex, several rounds of sex for grades. And it became like the thing out there. Then it declined again until BBC again carried out a documentary and discovered that in the lecture union, in the lecturers' relaxation spots, right there in the university.
Cold room.
They have a cold room. They have a code name for a room where they go to sexually harass their students. Nobody has sued BBC for running that documentary. That was groundbreaking. That documentary merely confirmed something that we have said, advocates against sex for grade have said consistently, that we have got degrees that are sexually transmitted. And that students have told us consistently that they are routinely abused by their lecturers. And we are, as an organization, happy, fulfilled to be collaborating with Suffer Don't Do in this campaign. It is one which we have a lot of confidence in.
One thing is, some persons are demanding sex for grades, for marks, while the others are demanding or are trading.
Sometimes trade.
So, okay, let's talk to Dr. Austin here.
From my interaction, I've come to see that sex is generally universally weaponized. And weaponization of sex is something that people who have power do to take advantage of the vulnerable. It's in the public service, it's in the private sector, in the religious institution, it's in the universities, it's in many other places. So we know that these things happen. But I think the concern here is you want to deal with it. You want to ensure that as much as possible you can deal with it, because particularly in the tertiary institutions, if you have to keep on, be tolerant, that is, to trading of grades for sex, you will come to a point where the people who are even teaching will become a very big danger to the society. So if we have to maintain quality, if we have to ensure that we are developing more, that those people that are passing through the universities or through the tertiary institutions who are going to be change agents in society must also carry themselves within acceptable universal standards. Sex should not play a part in employment. It shouldn't play a part in your degree. It shouldn't play a part in anything you have to get from society. So that's forgiven. But let me also say that when we look at sex for grade, as a parent personally, I had a challenge. Sometimes students will look at you and feel that you are too tough, and if you are hard on students in terms of discipline, you're a wicked person. But I've always explained to people that the reason I try to do what I do is I do not know who is going to teach my own children. And of course, 3 years ago, I went to a school, and my son said, Daddy, do you know there's somebody said she was your student? And I hope it wasn't one of those bad ones. So if we have this mentality and we have this understanding that whatever we put in the system will come back to us, then we expect that people who have been entrusted with the responsibility of teaching students should not take advantage of them sexually.
Okay, now this is a two-way thing. It's a two-way thing in the sense that it involves the students either giving willingly or forcefully. Now, it comes in a forceful way when the lecturers are demanding it from them, like he mentioned. So, what measures are you putting in place to ensure that these things are curtailed?
You see, from our advocacy, we try to strike a balance. We don't actually, it's not just the student lecturer thing, because when you measure 6 for grade, 6 for marks, most people will ask, most lecturers that we have actually tried to talk to will think it's just about them. It will shock you to know that most female lecturers, when you say lecturers, it's not just the male lecturers, most female lecturers, or some of the female lecturers, equally abuse the male. So when we begin to talk about the abuse, about the lecturer thing, it's not just the male lecturer. The female lecturers are not out of it. They are equally part of it. Now, you agree with me that most of our students want to have credit without having responsibility for the credit. Most students these days want it just a free ride. And I have gotten to the point of talking to a student. She said, please, that God should let that lecturer that will harass her locate her.
Seriously.
That's as bad as it is. Some student would want that happen. So it's a mindset thing. It's not something, it's just like fighting a spiritual battle where you need to be conscious of what you do and how you train it.
Now, if I may come in here, that actually sounds like while you are combating it, some persons are against you combating it. That's what it means. If some persons are saying lecturers should, if you, using what you said, that let that lecturer, lady or girl saying that, let that lecturer that or whatever harasses people come to her. Then if you're fighting it and somebody is saying that, what do you think of that?
See, the youths, if you catch the youths young, if you actually catch them and make them do the right thing, the society itself will improve. Okay. The youths are the future leaders of tomorrow, as we all know. Yes, and we need to actually begin to tell them that this is wrong and this is right. You can imagine when a student who is in higher institution that reads very well and is doing all she can to actually get her grade rightly, and somebody who doesn't read gets an A in the same course, he who reads gets a C. It's demoralizing. And we need to get these things right. Things that are not right, what is wrong and what is right. And we're actually doing all we can to make sure that whatever case that comes to us, we give justice to it. We don't just move into it. Because a lot of people, at the end of the day, when you approach them, have been molested, have been this, have been that, victimized by this lecturer. Come up with an evidence. They don't speak out. And that's part of the reason why we are doing this advocacy. Let the students begin to speak out. And let them know that there are some people like Sofa Don't Do who are out there to help the voice to make sure that they get justice to whatever thing that has been done to them.
Okay, just before we continue, let's take this quick break, and this one is going to be a Vox Pop we actually took at the University of Port Harcourt, where some students heard their view on this issue of don't trade sex for marks, don't trade sex for grades. Let's have it. Let's take a look at it.
An advertisement or sponsorship, contact 081 037 20769. Youth Forum, we've got you covered. Don't miss it.
Some girls are actually the ones that you see them exposing their bodies for this. Why some they are when they are old and the problem just comes to them. So it depends. For those that are actually wanting to exchange their bodies for grades, I think they should leave that part. Like they should just try and use their brain.
Sex for grades has been an issue here on campus and many other campuses in Nigerian universities. Like it's an ill that has been eating up the educational system. You find it whereby students go to lecturers to offer themselves, female students most especially, go to lecturers to offer themselves for getting grades like higher than those that read to write for exams. And sometimes you find out that lecturers also lure these students. Sometimes they pin down students by saying, if you don't see me in the office, then you're not passing my course. So you get it carried over and over again. So it's an ill that has been eating up the educational system and needs to be curbed, or else it will keep going down to the next generation. One of the things that needs to be done is to create an adequate reporting channels where students can report cases of sex for grade anonymously, without the identity being reviewed. And then this channel can take up this case and investigate and then punish the lecturer if found wanting. I think we need to strengthen the civic community of every tertiary institution across River State. Then secondly, we also have to make students understand that if they keep quiet about the case of sex for grade, it will continuously grow. They say when good people keep quiet, bad things become a norm in society, and if we cannot tackle it at one time, our children, our unborn generation will come and suffer from the same cases that we've refused to handle. So for posterity's sake, we should encourage students and school management to ensure that students report cases of sex for grade. All right, thank you.
not a nice thing to trade sex for grades or trade sex for marks. So don't do it. We have academic staff union chairman here in the Port chapter. So, sir, what are the policies being put in place to ensure that these things are curtailed?
Well, generally, there are ethical expectations, standards required of lecturers in their relationship with students. And the quality control, quality assurance unit of the university is driving that. But what is expected basically is that a student feels threatened or a student is threatened. That student should do well to ensure that you have at least a form of evidence.
Okay.
Something that could tie up your stories and relate that story to the person against whom you're making that report. If you have that, you can either go to your head of department, you can write directly to the quality assurance, quality control. You can also write to the office of the vice chancellor. Usually when a report is, panels are set up, which is why it's important that you have documentary evidence. At the end of the day, if you end up with mere allegations without evidence, then you would go back claiming that you didn't have justice. But the point has to be made that many students believe that they cannot report to anybody. But there are suggestion boxes. If you have a suggestion box all around the campus, you can drop your complaint in the suggestion box, and once those complaints are received, a panel should naturally follow the administration to investigate such matters. At that point, then you have to present your evidence. So the role of the victim in dealing with this is very, very important. If the victim is not willing, you could complain from here till tomorrow, there's not going to be a solution. But if you're willing, and you should have some trust in the institution. I do not think that it's going to be easy for offices to come together and victimize candidates. That's one. There is also, there are some mechanisms, some departments. In fact, in many of the it's becoming a university policy, particularly in my own university, that a lecturer cannot teach a course. So you've got to, you co-teach. And if you have 2-3 lecturers teaching one course, it's going to be difficult for an individual, one of them, to take advantage of a candidate. But while doing that, I mean, it's not watertight. You must ensure that if you have any experience, do well, particularly in these days of technology, do well to have an evidence that could tie up your story.
Okay, in a situation where those victims happen not to get evidences, but it is true and very true that they were harassed, that they are victims. We know no evidences. They were not in a condition, in a scenario where they could have actually fetched or gotten those evidences. What could be done?
No, you see, it's very difficult.
Okay.
Say that a student will be harassed without evidence because there are levels.
Okay.
In many of the cases that we're talking about, these lecturers have contact with these students, and it's not a one-day thing. It builds up gradually. You need to see me in my office. You haven't done this. Once you see a lecturer crossing the line, and you see that this is beyond the normal relationship between a student, then you should endeavor. But well, there are likely to be cases of rape. So it is only for cases of rape or where somebody just happens to go beyond what is allowed in the case of privacy to touch somebody spontaneously. In that case, you may not have an evidence and it will be difficult to prove that. But generally, in cases of harassment, because the reason is called, you look at it as harassment, is that it's usually tied to something. And there's usually a time of engagement, a time of negotiation. Those negotiations and those engagements should not
Okay. Now let's talk to Ken Henshaw, the Executive Director of We the People. Talking about anonymity of victims, reporting issues like this. How do you, what are the measures put in place to sensitize those people on how to relay their complaints to the appropriate quarter? Some persons, it's not everybody that knows how to go about these things. You talked about suggestion boxes. How effective are those things? Leaving that aside even, because we found ourselves in situations where you drop things, you drop suggestions, and we never hear of
Nothing
those
happens.
things. Do you understand? You never hear of those things. Leaving that aside now, what do you think can be done pressing on victims as to
Well, let's get a couple of things clear, right? We run the risk in this conversation of blaming the victims.
Okay.
That's what we're doing here. Putting the burden of proof on 17, 16, 20-year-old children to prove that a professor harassed them. I think that's a very unfair thing for us to leave this TV show. The burden of proof is not them. Just like the burden of protection is on lecturers and on the management of the university. Let me say the next thing. You said that it's a two-way thing. Students also harass lecturers. It's the most absurd things I've ever heard. Lecturers are people put in a position of trust above teenagers. It is their responsibility to say no. In the relationship of a lecturer to a student, the person who holds the knife, the yam, the hammer, and the nail is the lecturer. It is the responsibility of that lecturer. So there's no such thing as students harassing lecturer. It doesn't exist. It's a misnomer. Let's get that. It's a misnomer. You are the person in a position of authority. You are the one who stands a charge. You took an oath. You are the one who took an oath. You are the disciplined one trying to instill morals and knowledge. It's your job to say no if a student harasses you. Let's get that clear. So we do not victimize the victims. Talk about standards for reporting. Okay? We have created a system over 20 years. This problem existed when I was in the university about 20 years ago. The bottom line is this, that a young student can walk up to a lecturer and offer sex for because the opportunity exists. Because there's already a norm that sex can be exchanged for grades. That standard exists already. Let's get that clear. You are talking about sex for grades now. When we are done with this, we're going to deal with the problem of handouts, which we dealt with in my time in the university. We're going to deal with the problem of money for grades. We're going to deal with the problem of textbook, substandard textbook for grades. So we need to be clear about this, right?
Okay.
That asking is, look, all it should take for an investigation to be triggered over a case of sexual harassment should simply be a victim reporting. Lecturer A, B, C, D assaulted me. It should be enough to trigger an investigation. To go into the history of reporting, it should be enough. You can't ask a teenage girl of 16 years old or 18 years to begin to look for evidence. What if the lecturer confronted you one-on-one? Actually, listen, you're going to fail my course if you do not do A, B, C, D. What evidence is to be get? You want to transform the student to a police officer? No, that is unfair to that student. I think that if a student, hold on, if a student reports,
we have
it's enough.
We have a female activist who is in the house actually about to join us, and all right, Nora.
Okay, I would like to encourage every youth out there to be bold enough to speak out and speak. Do not allow yourself to be abused or victimized by any lecturer. And as a student, be it male or female, because if you look at it, it's not just female students, but we have 90% of female students who are being victimized. So speak up, feel free to speak out, and let your voice be heard. Do not hide under the shadows of I do not want to lose my degree or something. I mean, speak up. That is the only way you can get help.
All right, let's talk to River State coordinator. So what don't do? Want to be part of it? If I want to be part of it, if any young person out there wants to be part of it, what's the procedure?
If you want to get involved, join us through our website www.sufferdontdo.org, and through the website you just click on get involved. You're involved already, just fill the form. It's so user friendly.
All right, thank you very much. I've been with the River State coordinator, Suffer Don't Do, and he is by name Ona Chidi. Thanks so very much.
Thank you.
And of course, I've been with the executive director with people. He is by name Ken Henshaw.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
And while we were discussing, a pretty lady joined us by the name Nora Efyong, an activist.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, now do not be a victim of sexually transmitted grade. It is not just about STDs this time, or STIs this time, but we're campaigning against STGs. Is that it? Sexually transmitted grades. It is not it. Young people, go study your books, and when you study your books, no lecturer could actually tell you that if you don't give me your body, you don't get this course, because you already know what you have up there. Meanwhile, if you do all that and yet you get yourself threatened, there are platforms you could actually make your reports, and these the platforms are all there with the people. Suffer Don't Do. They are there to help you out of that situation. So don't force yourself on the lecturers as well. We've heard that lecturers are the ones harassing the students, not the students harassing the lecturers. So as young people, let's do what is good, what is right, and what is right and what is good is not sex for grades or sex for marks, but studying and doing what you're being sent to the school to do. My name is John Best, and on this note, we call it on this episode of Youth Forum.
Lanterns lighting up the town, peace on earth is all around. Everything is calm on Christmas Eve. There's goodwill in the air tonight. Angels sing by candlelight, their voices carried on the wind. When carol singers gather round, when I hear that festive sound, I wanna join with them and sing. They sing a merry song, and we all sing along. A festive melody that tells us Christmas time is here. See the stars tonight, they're shining bright, 'cause it's Christmas time, and it's my favorite time.